Great day, everyone, and welcome to 3CP TV. My name is Yathis Johnson, and I am the founder and president of Third Culture People. So, 3CP TV is a media resource helping individuals become third culture people, where you learn to embrace a greater variety of identities and skillfully bridge the gap between our differences. So when you watch 3CP TV, you learn to connect with anyone at any time from anywhere in the world. So today we have with us a beautiful soul. Her name is Thanh Nguyen, and we met through a mutual friend. And so I am pleased that she's with us today. Let me just share a few little tidbits about her. She has her BA in Christian education from the University of Northwestern St. Paul. She has an MA in theological studies from Bethel University. She is the founder and president of C3 Cultural Competency Consulting. And so she is, again, a wonderful person. Thanh, would you just say hello to our audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Yathis, for inviting me here, and welcome everyone. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to working with Thanh in the future. But let me tell you, becoming a third culture person will not only grow you personally, but it will grow you professionally, allowing you to expand your imaginations, your limitations, and building relationships with people from different different backgrounds, different walks of life, an amazing journey. So what we say at 3CP, we change the way you view DE&I everywhere. So we've got a great program here today. Today, we're going to explore the rise in anti-Asian racism. And we're going to talk about Than's work in this particular area, because she's done some phenomenal work in this area, addressing and focusing on anti-racism education, especially as it relates to the Asian community, immigration and refugee advocacy. And we're also going to speak about her work in general that she's been doing in this space. So, Thanh, would you just go ahead and talk to us? Give us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I just gave a brief description and intro, but we want to hear from you. Tell us, how'd you get into this? What inspired you? Maybe you shared some of your background with me about being a refugee. So share that with us. Help our audience understand.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Well, I was born in Vietnam, and my family escaped the war in Vietnam in the mid-70s. We escaped on a boat and were refugees, and a church in Minnesota sponsored us, as many churches and agencies were sponsoring families that were escaping. So they helped us settle in Minnesota. And I just have a variety of background experiences that have led me to this point. A lot of it has been in service overseas, leading student teams. I worked full time at a university and directed their global service program. So I would send out students around the world, and I would do that too, leading teams to serve. And then eventually I started teaching there as well, courses on race and culture and global service. And I've worked helping settle African refugees for a while in the Twin Cities. And so all of these different experiences with different cultures and peoples and countries have led me to start my own business in training organizations in cultural competency and refugee advocacy, immigration advocacy, anti-racism. And so it's led me also to talk on the rise in anti-Asian racism that has been kind of exacerbated because of COVID this past year. And I thought it would be kind of my side hustle, this Asian topic. And mostly I work with culture and race, which I still do. So I thought it would be a side hustle, but then this past year, because of a lot of horrible incidents is I've been doing a lot of speaking and advocacy against anti-Asian hate. So that's
Mm.
kind of how I got to where I am
Yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. And it's been very challenging, I know, for the Asian community. I've seen some horrific videos of incidents. Um, how has that impacted you personally? Talk to us about your own personal experience in that space and just the
Mhm.
the awful, emotions that you may have experienced with that.
Mhm. Yeah, well, right after the Atlanta murders, it was really a really heavy space. I mean, it's
Mm,
really started out last year when COVID really started gaining traction in the United States, and actually it coincided with the George Floyd murder. So there were these two huge major events because I'm in the Twin Cities, about 15 minutes from where George Floyd was killed,
wow.
happening at the same time.
Mm,
So trying to address both in the Black community and the Asian community. And then 1 year later, where we think 2021 is going to be better than 2020,
yeah.
it's a whole new animal now, right? So with the Atlanta murders, almost a year after COVID hit in March, right?
Mm,
So that was just for me, even physically and mentally and personally taxing and heavy and traumatic because I've been more in this space where I'm advocating for anti-racism stuff. And so a lot of um, organizations and for example, my church was
mm,
creating rallies, and I was being invited to speak at different rallies and invited to speak at different webinars, talking in these areas and trying to educate people that actually this is not a new thing. Anti-Asian racism is not a new thing. It's actually
right.
read into the history of America. So trying to educate people on that and speaking up against um, these things wherever I can,
Yeah.
and in
Well,
conjunction with the
talk
Asian
to,
American community.
yeah, talk to us about the history because a lot of us, I mean, I've heard of the Exclusion Act, but what does that all mean? Talk to us about that because it's not as highlighted, it's not as well known as the civil rights and the struggle that African Americans have experienced. Talk to us more about the history.
Yeah, because it's really not that taught. I didn't learn it in high school. I didn't learn it in
Mm,
college. I didn't learn it in graduate studies, right? And
mm,
so when Asian immigrants started coming over to America,
mhm.
for example, the Chinese started coming during the late 1700s or mid
Yeah.
1800s for the gold rush. Okay, there were other immigrant populations as well. In South Indians actually started coming in the mid 1800s too, and we just don't realize that. But let
Wow.
me focus on what you mentioned, the Chinese immigration. And so when they came through Angel Island. You've heard of Ellis Island, right?
Yeah.
Where most
Mhm,
Europeans came through the East
mhm,
Coast. Many Asians came through the West Coast of Angel Island, but they were really badly treated. They were
mhm,
separated from their families. Some were deported. Some were detained for really long times. They had really invasive searches on their bodies,
mhm,
and this type of thing didn't happen on the East Coast. The Europeans were like, "Oh yeah, come on in. No visas
mhm,
needed." It was pretty simple compared to what the Asian immigrants had to go through. Okay,
mhm.
so when the Chinese came over to work on the railroads, if you've heard of the Transcontinental Railroad,
Yep.
they were brought in for cheap labor.
Mhm,
Okay, and then they were excluded from citizenship. There was this
mhm,
act called the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, where basically the U.S. is telling them, "Come on over and do cheap labor, but we're not going to allow you to be citizens."
mm,
And if that sounds familiar today
mhm,
at all, then
mm.
um, think about that.
Um,
So they were excluded. And then in 1924, another act called nicknamed the Asian Exclusion Act excluded the rest of Asia from coming to America as well. And then you're probably familiar with the Japanese prison camps. Most people are with the
mhm,
World War II. So about 120,000 Japanese were imprisoned there, and most of them were citizens. Okay,
mhm,
and other Japanese from like South America were also imprisoned as
mm,
well. And then let me tell you about two Supreme Court cases. There was a Japanese man,
mhm,
Takao Ozawa, and a South Indian man, Bhagat Singh Thind, who petitioned the Supreme Court, to become citizens. Takao argued that he was white because at that time only white people could become citizens, and mostly white male landowning men. And so Takao argued that, hey, my skin is almost as white as other people, but more importantly than that, I'm a good citizen. I went to school here, raising my family here, but he was denied citizenship because they said, well, your skin might be light, but you're not Caucasian. Okay. So that was in the 1920s. And then 3 months later, this South Indian man saw that case, Bhagat Singh Thind, and he argued that, well, Indians are considered Caucasian. At that time, they were considered Caucasian. Caucasian comes from this region near Russia, the Caucasus Mountains. And so at that time, the South Indians and North Africans were considered Caucasian, right? But then the Supreme Court said, well, you might be Caucasian, but we determine what the white means. The common man thinks of white as like Scandinavian, Norwegian. You don't look white. So basically, the Supreme Court contradicted themselves on those two cases and did not allow the Japanese community and the South Indians community to become citizens. So that's another, racist laws that came into place. And then there's other things like Chinese lynchings that we rarely hear about. So this whole idea of
in the United States of America.
Yep.
Really?
There were and Chinese like mob attacks against Chinese. Yeah, they call it the Chinese Massacre of 1871. A bunch of about 500 people came and attacked these Chinese people, killed them, and then hung them. So and then a lot of these conflicts were over labor, right? Or fearing this yellow peril, or here comes the Chinese people trying to overtake our land, bringing disease, stealing our jobs, things like that. Very similar to what we have going on today of the xenophobia, basically. So those are just kind of about 5 different events that are in our history.
Wow. Now you have your certification with the IDI, I believe.
Yes.
So, and that's a great organization. Glad that you're certified. We need more practitioners like yourself in the DE&I space doing what you do. What would you recommend to organizations, companies, businesses that have Asian Americans working in their businesses or in their organizations? What would you recommend for them for greater understanding? Because sometimes Asian Americans are misunderstood because they are culturally different. How would you help them bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say like the Asian American population is not a monolith. So educate yourselves about the vast majority of different people groups, different Asian groups. Because if you think about it, and I'm going to quiz you, Yathis, do you know how many countries are in Asia? Didn't know we're going to get a pop quiz, right?
Oh my gosh.
It's 48. There's 48 countries.
Oh, 48. Okay, thank you.
In Asia.
I was going to give a higher number because I know there are some smaller countries like, if I pronounce it right, Laos, right? You got Cambodia, so you got Myanmar. So you got these small countries. Even Vietnam is relatively small, and so
So you're talking about like Southeast Asia. You named a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, but then there's like the East Asian, right? The Chinese, the Japanese, Korean, and then the South Asians, the India, Pakistan, right? Sri Lanka, and then you have Central Asians, all the Stan countries. So if you think about that, those are vastly different Asian cultures. So we can't be lumped all into one and expect to understand our histories and our cultures. And that's another thing that I would say is like to dismantle the stereotypes of Asian Americans. Because what are some stereotypes that you think of, Yathis? I'm going to quiz you again, that may be some popular stereotypes about Asians.
That they're the math, right? Everyone's great in math, right? And they're the the model minority, basically.
Yes, exactly. That's great. And so that is a huge stereotype that we need to dismantle, the model minority. So if you think of what that is, that's like, oh, the very high achieving, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers. And so when you think of Asian Americans as only that stereotype, then you mask the issues and the problems, and it's like this anti-Asian racism that's coming up. It masks those issues that the Asian American population has, and it doesn't allow for difference, because there are immigrants from Asia that came over by choice, okay, and immigrants and refugees that came over because we needed to survive. And so those pathways can lead to very different pathways. So if you only think of the very high achieving, the richer, crazy rich Asians, right?
One of my favorite movies, by the way.
Yeah. So if you think of all of us like that, then you're going to have issues, because how this model minority stereotype came about was actually in the civil rights movement. There was an article by a man named William Peterson in the New York Times. And he was talking about, oh, look at those Japanese people. They're so, they're doing well. They're working hard. They're keeping quiet. But he was kind of comparing them to the uprisings during the civil rights movement. And he wrote this article in the New York Times. And he was basically saying, look at those problem minorities that are uprising, complaining about civil rights. Why don't you compare them to these Japanese who are hardworking? They keep quiet. And so what the model minority stereotype does is it kind of does this divide and conquer and pits us against the poor, urban, Black and brown communities that are fighting for justice, right? But you also have to look at what happened in the mid-'60s. There was another immigration law that canceled out those past racist laws that now started allowing Asians into the country, whereas before they were not allowed.
Go ahead. Can I ask, was this in the 1970s when they had this law? I think someone told me they had this law that allowed the well-to-do Asians to come.
It was in 1965.
1965. Okay.
The Civil Rights Immigration Act. Okay. So that's when immigration is opened up to the Asian countries. But who came? Was the highly educated? Was people in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. A lot of the Indians, there's a H-1B1 visa. A lot of Indians in the tech field have come through that visa. So if you have highly selective immigration, you're bringing in the cream of the crop, right? That are educated, are in these high-paying fields. And you're not bringing in the slums, the poor people from the slums, right? And so that contributes to this model minority myth, where those are the high-income earning people. But then you have like families such as myself that came in as refugees from Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, the Hmong people. And so it's a different struggle when you come in with nothing and you're coming in as refugees. So we really have to, they call it disaggregate the data so that you study all the different kinds of Asians that are here and not lump them all into one high achieving category.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I mean, even in the African American community, it is pretty diverse, right? I mean, if you look at the Caucasian Anglo community, it's pretty diverse. So this is my soapbox. I believe that I feel the census is oversimplified, and we all have hyphens, so you're Chinese American, you're Korean American, you're Vietnamese American, you're African American, you are a Caribbean American, and so forth. You just have, and you're Irish American, Italian American. So I think that we've oversimplified things. To your point, when we oversimplify, it can easily cause misinterpretations, misunderstandings of who we are. So talk to us a little bit about this refugee journey.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was only 3. And actually my first memory is, so I had talked about how churches were sponsoring families. And so we escaped on a boat. We were in a refugee camp in Singapore for a few months. And then the US at that time was taking in a lot of the refugees because they fought the war. And so either out of guilt or compassion, it's probably a little bit of both, they were taking in refugees. So we got into Arkansas in a refugee camp there, and then a family from Minnesota came down and sponsored us. That means they agreed to come and take care of us, find us housing,
Mm.
and help us settle in, basically. And so it was the compassion of the church. And so my first memory is when this family, the Tom and Doris Moody, they were named, they picked us up from the airport. And I don't recall this, but my mom says my brother was throwing up on the plane ride all the way from Arkansas to Minnesota, and I was fine. But when
Wow.
they picked us up, I remember sitting in the front seat with Mrs. Moody, and this was in the 70s. So I guess it was okay for a kid to sit on the front seat on the lap of a car, of a person in the front seat of a car. So when we pulled into the garage, you know how it makes a small jerk when you stop a car?
Mhm.
Well, everything came out all over her
Oh,
lap. That's my first childhood memory. And my mom says that Mrs. Moody screamed, "She vomited on me." And so yeah, she's probably thinking, I bring you to Minnesota and this is the thanks I get for for doing that. So yeah,
Wow.
they helped us settle in, brought us to church, got my dad a job. And so after that, a lot more Vietnamese refugees were settling in here. My mom sponsored more of her extended family. And now it kind of goes in cycles. Minnesota is a very welcoming place for refugees. They have a lot of social services. So it goes
Okay.
in cycles. It was the Vietnamese in the 70s, the Hmong in the 80s, and then the Somali were coming here. And now there's more like Karen refugees. We have a very pretty large refugee community in Minnesota. And, speaking of back to immigration laws, so there was really it was kind of a piecemeal, like, oh, this is a crisis, the Vietnamese coming to America, escaping the war, and so let's take them in. But
Yeah.
but people say like, oh, well, why don't those illegal immigrants come the legal way? Well, really, there was no legal way. There is no legal way for a lot of poor, uneducated people. And so, speaking with the refugees, they had to create a law to take in more refugees. So the 1980 Act, Refugee Act, allowed more refugees to come in. So they were adjusting the laws to come in, whereas before they didn't really have legal ways. And so now think about that.
Wow.
We create who gets to create the laws and who has the power. And I named some very racist laws that were in America and how we have to adjust to meet the needs of the world, really.
Wow. When we talk about social justice, you are literally doing it, and you're doing it in a way that some others may not be familiar with. So this immigration and refugee advocacy that you do. So we applaud your work. So before we depart, you have a Vietnamese background, as you mentioned. Would you share with us 3 things you would like our audience to know about your culture?
Yeah, I will. The Vietnamese are very resilient. If you look into our history, there was always these bigger empires trying to conquer us, like the Chinese, Japanese, Russian, French, and then America got involved in the conflict, and everyone fighting over this small piece of land, right? And eventually, they were all kicked out. And if you look at the history, which I was never a history buff until I married my husband. He's very much a history buff, and just learning more about the history of our small country fighting off all these big empires.
Wow.
Right. And then secondly, the Vietnamese refugees who have come to America, we've settled in here, and out of tragedy, we came here, but we are building a life for ourselves and contributing, and not just surviving, but thriving. So I'm just very honored to be a part of that community, but also like keeping our roots in Vietnam. It's pretty amazing too how Vietnam now has a better relationship with the U.S. They normalized relations back in the 90s, I think. And so people are more able to come back and visit family and try to retain as much of our culture as possible. And then the third thing I would say is, we are a very small population in the US, but we've had a big impact with our cuisine. So if you've never had a banh mi or pho, then you are missing out, because especially pho is going international. Okay?
Wow. Banh mi and pho.
Yes, banh mi is the Vietnamese sandwich, and pho. Yeah. And it's funny because my African refugee friends that I'm part of an organization that helps settle them. And so I'll feed them some Vietnamese food, but for some reason they always love pho. It's like, can you make that noodle stuff again that you made for us before? It's like, Something about pho is internationally loved.
But I think now that I know banh mi and pho, I will find it because I'm a foodie and I love exploring different foods from different cultures. And I did eat at a Vietnamese restaurant when I was in Tacoma, Washington, not long ago.
Okay.
But I don't remember exactly what I had. Whatever I had, it was good. It was really, really good. So I'm looking forward to the banh mi and pho. So, wow, this has been amazing, Con. Thank you so much for being a part of 3CP TV today. This is May, and we're celebrating the Asian American and Pacific Island AAPI month, right? And so we just want to thank you for taking time to be with us today. Can you help our audience know if they wanted to get in touch with you, if they wanted to ask more questions? What is your social media platforms that you're on? What are those? And give your website. If you could just, give that right now, we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So my website is c3consults.com. And I do have a Facebook page. So if you do that little at C3 Consults, I think it will come up. So it's C3 Cultural Competency Consulting is also my Facebook page. So c3consults.com is my website. And I would love people to jump on and contact me if you want to see more of what I do. Appreciate it, Yafis, for you inviting me here today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I've learned so much, and I know there's so much more that I need to learn from you. So we're going to be doing something. Con and I are actually going to be doing a Facebook Live, and we're going to have some panelists with us, some Asian Americans, some African Americans. And so we want to build that community, make it tighter, and develop that synergy that we believe that we should have. So I want to thank everyone. Again, thank you, Con, for your time again. Thank you all for tuning into 3CP TV. May you learn to connect with anyone at any time from anywhere in the world. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, 3CP TV, to view our latest episodes. Also subscribe to our LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. You can get more CQ, cultural intelligence, DE&I content there. We want to help you grow, and we want to make our world a better place. So thank you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.